everybody, today I want to again talk a little bit more about Python. But you see, the last 20 videos, or probably about two months and a half, I have just been talking about Python and my learning. From Python. So I decided, well, let's get a relaxed day pretty much. And well, let's see why Python. So we have learned pretty much how to Python or how to program non-Python. Now let's learn why to learn on Python. In this case, I took a little bit of time, not much. So if I sound as if farm, it's probably because I kind of am. I took like 3 articles talking about it, but from what I see from well my little experience here in Python, I would say it looks okay. So I want to talk about pretty much the pros and cons of Python. And well, let's start off with the pros. I think starting off with pros is probably the best way because we need to understand why would you use this language as why it's good. And the first point is well that it's simple. That's pretty much the first point everyone talks about Python. Python is simple for a lot of things, really, but one of them is that you don't need to worry about syntax. You don't need to worry much about syntax, at least, and you don't need to worry much on your code. In generally, Python code is shorter than for example, the other big uh, programming languages like I don't know Java or C++, perhaps C Sharp. From what I've heard, is smaller compared to C++, and Java. So pretty much it's easier and it's simpler to code in general. So well, it's easier to learn, it's easier to read, or that means it's easier to understand what's happening, and it's also easier to write because you don't need much or you don't need more uh, plan out code. For example, you can kinda run along with your code. You don't need to worry much on on the creation of the your code on the well, my code here it will have a grateful impact here. It also helps in Python, of course, especially if you're talking about variables and such. But well, Python generally works much easier, and that's actually one of the biggest points. That's why I kind of took my time talking about why it was easiest, because it's just shorter overall. And some people claim that because it's shorter, it's a better language in the question of productivity. After all, you don't need to take your time planning your code exactly. You need to plan your time of what your code will do and not how you will do it. You can kind of go along, you don't need to worry much on behavior or on syntax. That's what you're claiming at least. It for me it makes a lot of sense. It's pretty easy. If I'm going to show actually some of my code here, I can kind of show you. This is actually the code would be for today, but then I decided, and also I need to make this work. So actually, it's a good excuse to make this video today. But let's for example, here. Here I'm connecting, and also I corrected the last video. I'm not creating a FTP protocol. I'm using FTP server, or in this case, a client. So just an amendment. But here I want to show you, for example, this 20 lines of code, which pretty much could be shortened down to probably about 15 lines of code, if not perhaps almost 10 lines of code considering I have spaces, makes a connection. You can see it connects to FTP server. It asks me for the input, defines the variables and input, and then it makes a transfer from files from nowhere, basically from this directory to the public directory, and show me a list of, well, pretty much the archive of ebiblio.org, who owned it and whatnot, or where is it. So you can see that's quite a lot. If I go actually from all of these time I programming on Python, my biggest codes weren't actually that big. Even manipulating data. Uh, Here, for example, is a short find conquer. Yeah, you can see I'm trying to find a big code, but if I remember correctly, one of the biggest code was like 50 lines maximum. So it isn't a lot. Though, of course, I'm not making industrial code here. I'm making very long codes, but still, I'm max for now 50 lines of code, and it's very easy. It's very easy to program and to understand what you're doing. So I think that also helps a lot. Um, well, that's one of the reasons why it's so popular, basically. And then comes a very point. Now, there are the most points of pros of Python is, well, the Python is just easier. And there's actually a very pretty good example here. And this example is talking about interpreted language. Now, what is interpreted language? Well, that means that the code will be interpreted in lines. So the code will be read as lines. I actually thought all programming languages do this, but apparently Python is not far from the only, but kind of special in the sense, or at least from the major ones. So it runs line by line. So why is it good? Does it make it slower? Well, yes, but I'll get this in a second. But what does good is that it means that when there is a, well, a error or bug, for example, let's say you forget when you create a, let's say you forget when you're creating a line of program, for example, when you're creating a loop, you forget to have the double points. Like, for example, let me show you. You could, for example, you could perhaps, let's say, forget to put the comma here. It's not comma, sorry, but anyway, you will see that when it happens, when I run my code, it will pinpoint exactly where my bug is, line 9. You can see here. And this is actually not common, again, because since it's reading line by line, it reads this, and then when it reads a line that, well, just doesn't work, like this one, if you didn't have the last part, then it will just tell me exactly where it is. So it's much easier to correct mistakes, because when you run your code, it pretty much tells you where this mistake is. So it's much easier to find exactly where the error is because it shows you. So pretty much nice for debugging. And, well, if this wasn't enough, it's also dynamically timed. Now I kind of reading this out because I want to get the technical time right, but pretty much that means that Python doesn't need to know exactly what your variable is. Now that sounds kind of strange, but pretty much Python, if I don't specify, for example, let's say, for example, let's create another Python file here. Let's call it test for now. If I create a variable, let's call variable test, and I put equal 1. Now, I'm not telling you what this variable is. I'm not telling if it's a int variable and specifying like this, which this is int, or not specifying also Well, this is in the wrong way. I'm specifying if it's string. I'm just saying that variable test equals 1. Now, 1 what? It could be a string, sure, but it's probably an int. Now, it is good because since you don't need to worry about it, you don't need, again, I said this one time, you don't need to lay it down a idea for your code. You can just type out a variable, or not even type out. You can just, when you get the variable, you just create it. For example, if I have here an input here, let's say variable, let's say var test, since var is usually shortened to a variable, input, which is your input here, and just do a short print to show you. Print, whoops, var test. I will just, let's see, input here, let's go nothing, and it'll print nothing. Let's put, for example, 1, it will print 1. Now, it's very good because, again, you don't need to specify. You need to specify my variables as string. I don't need to specify the int. So I don't need to pretty much think about it that much. I can just type out my variables. So here you go. My variables pretty much do it. And, well, it's easier for the programmer because you don't need to lay down. Now, so there's a very interesting point of Python, which I think is not controversial, but it's interesting, but it's free and open source. Now, why is it good per se? Well, because since it's free, you need to pay it for it. So that's a good point, definitely. You can, from anywhere in the world, if you have internet connection and a PC strong enough, which is almost any PC, to run Python, you can run Python. Just take Python, you can learn it. Maybe you are studying programming, Python as maybe a hobby of yours. You don't need to spend any money on it. Perhaps on courses, but even then, there's courses online free. But in the Python, or the tool itself, you don't need to. And it's also open source. Now, why it's good to be open source? Well, that means that there can be any number of configurations. Well, first off, there are people that can configure, they can alterate, sorry, the internal code of the Python. So, for example, let's say you are, I don't know, you are specified, your field of study, your field of programming is more towards, for example, rollout programming, and you're trying to program with Python anyways because you like that much. You can take it, or you can even, you can take yourself, or you can try to find online the customization of the Python itself that allows easier time programming robots, artificial intelligence, and whatnot. Or maybe just some things you think it's better for Python, you just want to, alterate it. Not just that, but you can also create plugins, you can create updates, you can create, or you can create pretty much anything you want with Python. Just take your time and your knowledge of program language programming, and you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. You can do extremely specific things, and you can alterate some things to your liking. So that's pretty great. And because of that, it's also very, very, very supported by the community. When I mean supported by the community, it's pretty much there is a great library support. So there's tons and tons and tons. From what I'm reading here, there is inside Python tons and tons of libraries you can take, but you can download Python package manager and import great from, for example, the Python package index or py, which is from Python, and pi from package index, which consists over 200,000 packages. So that's quite a lot, I would say. Well, you see, there's a lot of things you can do again because it's because it's open source and it's free. There's a lot of things you can do with Python, so you probably will have a great library support of it. So you can have extremely specific things, pretty much anything you want with it. Not just that, but the portability. Interestingly, the way Python works is interesting because it can run the way it is in any device. You can run in a theoretically a Mac, in, Windows, in a computer in general, in iPad not, sorry, tablets, cell phones, Androids, why not, servers, really smartwatches. If you can run Python on it, it will run Python on it. And you don't need to have any configuration to your code at all. So I could take all of my codes now, and I could, for example, put in a, I don't know, a smart fridge if I want to, you know, make the necessary configurations. I could run in a smart fridge if I want. Now, the only thing you need to watch out is for system dependent features. So if something, for example, from Windows specifically you try to run, it won't run in a Mac because, well, it's not in Windows. Um, so, well, you need to watch out for that. But if not, it's the same code for everything: web development, um, user side, programming for programs and whatnot. So it's very interesting. And I will do a second part to this video tomorrow, saying more on the negative aspect. Because again, there's a lot of, I would say a lot of things. I would say the advantage probably outweigh the disadvantages if you are a beginner or if you're trying to use Python more for what it's designed for, which is more designed to the server side of things. I would say it's just easier to program. Now, again tomorrow I will say specifically the disadvantages of Python. So if you're curious about that, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't need to check out tomorrow. You just receive a notification when it comes out. Not just that, like this video if you, well, agree with those parts, what you think will, you know, how greater or how you think it affects you, or if you're on the side of the program, if you're a programmer, or in general, just what you think about it, or maybe even just you think like a video topic you want me to talk about. Make sure you put everything there in the comments down below. But well, that's it for today. I hope you liked it from the content for today, and I see you tomorrow. Goodbye. Woo!